Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Friday Preview. It is going great guns, and the hits are just telling for itself. So we do appreciate you tuning in, and we're getting set for a big Week 6 action in the Eastern Football League. Of course, Round 6 in Divisions 2, 3 and 4, and Rounds 5 in Division 1. So looking forward to getting stuck into that. Peter Baird and Ben Warren Smith have gone walkabouts. Not quite sure where they have gone, but joining me to help me go through all the games is, of course, New Zealand's favourite woman of all time. It's a very good afternoon to Annie French.
Thank you, Ben. Nice to be on here for the first time.
Nice to have you on, and let's start with Division 4, some interesting games this weekend.
Okay, so the first game we've got Park Orchards versus Notre.
Yeah, huge opportunity for Park Orchards this weekend. Of course, we saw them, the 98.1 Radio Eastern team last weekend. They went up against Forest Hill, weren't able to quite get the chocolates, so they'd be looking to bounce back. We heard from Nunawading in the huddle during the week that they're a very confident young side at the moment. They got a great win over Sylvan last weekend. Look, I'm probably going to go with Nunawading in this case. They've got Sam McCallum up forward, who's currently the second top leading goal kicker in Division 4 behind Lucas Appleby from South Belgrave. He's the focal point at the moment. He's the key for Nunawading, and they've got some great players running through that midfield. Guys like Christian Holdsworth, Aidan Suckle and Reece Harrop, those are the likely types. So I just think the class and experience of Nunawading will probably get them over the line.
Right, and the next game we've got Surrey Park versus Canterbury.
Interesting game, this one. Surrey Park, when are they going to break through for this elusive win? Probably a perfect opportunity against Canterbury this weekend. Canterbury shocked a lot of people at the start of the year. They were possibly, there was talk going around that Canterbury could be the team that might sneak into the finals this year. They've just dropped off in the last couple of weeks. They went down to the Ferntree Gully Eagles last weekend by 29 points. They're just missing a couple of guys up forward. They're missing that big goal kicker at the moment as well. Brent Isles. I don't think he's playing at the moment, so that's not a brilliant sign for the Canterbury Football Club. And I still think they've probably got enough class at the moment. As we know, Surrey Park's still a developing side. I think Canterbury will be able to get the chocolates, even though this game is at Surrey Park Reserve.
Right, and next up we've got Eastern Lions versus Kilsyth.
Eastern Lions, a young side. Of course, they started the season reasonably well and have dropped off a little bit in recent weeks. Of course, they had the bye last weekend. They currently sit in 8th position with 2 wins and 2 losses. Speaking of young sides, though, Kilsyth is a very young side and just struggling at the moment in Division 4. Currently sit 10th on the ladder with yet to get a win on the board and 4 losses. They have had a bye, but they really are struggling at the moment. I just get the feeling that the Eastern Lions, with the likes of their captain Jamie Devonish running around that forward line, running around the midfield, I should say, would probably be too good. But don't discount Kilsyth. I just get the feeling a win could be around the corner, even though it doesn't. That probably doesn't have any merit from going on past weeks. But Kilsyth, they'll come, but not this weekend against the Eastern Lions, who will probably be too strong at Lewis Park, a very unique home ground.
All right, so next up is Ferntree Gully Eagles versus Forest Hill.
No doubt this is the game of the round in Division 4. The Ferntree Gully Eagles had a tough start to the year. Their first 2 games were against the Bayside and South Belgrave, had 2 losses, and they've bounced back ever since then, and they've beaten teams who they should have beaten as well. And even though there's a difference in ladder positions, Forest Hill are higher on the ladder than the Ferntree Gully Eagles. This is a game the Ferntree Gully Eagles must win, especially if they want to try and push that top 5 and get into that top 5 as soon as they can. I like the Ferntree Gully Eagles. They've got a good mix of youth and experience with the likes of Paul Giannopoulos and Muscat running through that midfield and pushing forward as well. Then you've got the likes of Ricky Aitken and, of course, Hayden Lovitz, who's a fantastic young player. I really like the Ferntree Gully Eagles. I think they're going places. We saw Forest Hill last weekend. The Shoulders boys are doing wonders for Forest Hill out there at the moment. So I get the feeling that Ferntree Gully Eagles will probably a little bit too strong, though, at home at Ferntree Gully Reserve, and they'll probably start to push the top 5 with a win on the weekend.
Right, and the final game for Division 4, we've got South Belgrave versus Sylvan.
Of course, the local rivalry up in the mountains there. A bit of feeling, I reckon, will be between these two sides, but I don't think there's any doubt that the South Belgrave Football Club will win this one. They currently sit second on the ladder, just behind the Basin, only on percentage, though. South Belgrave are a fantastic team, and they are... I'll be very surprised if they didn't play in the Division 4 Grand Final this year. Sylvan, a disappointing loss to Nunawading last weekend. Of course, beat Forest Hill the week before. Came up against Nunawading last weekend and wasn't able to get there. Ashfrad did not play, so interesting to see if he comes into the side this weekend. I'm sure you'll be able to see that on your screens right now. Just get the feeling that South Belgrave, they'll be way too strong. Too much firepower from back line to forward line, and I think South Belgrave will be able to get the chocolates on the weekend.
So let's have a look at Division 3 for this weekend. We've got Heathmont versus Glen Waverley Hawks.
And of course, Annie, this is our 98.1 Radio Eastern game of the round. Make sure you tune in from 1 till 6 p.m. on 98.1 Radio Eastern FM this Saturday afternoon. Or, of course, streaming right here on our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/footyefl. Of course, a huge game for many reasons, mainly because these two teams played in the Division 4 Grand Final last year. They now meet in Division 3 after both of them went up with Parkour, which is coming in Division 4. Big victory for Heathmont last weekend. Of course, they were able to bounce back after a disappointing loss against Boronia 2 weeks ago. So they'll be, of course, they were pushed by Wantirna South, but good to see the likes of Lee Odermatt get named in the best and also be able to get some goals under his belt as well. It won't be any easy task. The Glen Waverley Hawks have been impressive in the last couple of weeks. Of course, a solid victory over Warrandyte, but I think they'd be a little bit disappointed that the margin wasn't a little bit bigger. At home at HE Parker Reserve, I'd be surprised if the Jets weren't able to get this one. But the Hawks, I think this will be a mental game more than anything else for the Hawks. They'll be keen on getting some revenge from last year's loss to the Jets in that grand final. So watch out for the likes of the big guys like Darren Dewar and Andrew Azzopardi, who were so good in last year's grand final. They'll be good again. Heathmont for mine, but it'll be a very close game.
And next up, we've got Ringwood versus Boronia.
Ringwood are a team who's really come from the clouds in the past couple of weeks. Of course, Josh Toohey took over 3 weeks ago and has done wonders for this team ever since coming in. Of course, they won two of those 3 games, and they pushed North Ringwood to 2 points last weekend. A fantastic effort by the Redbacks on the back of the likes of Paddy Burmeister, some of those younger players who, of course, Paddy Burmeister received a Leader Young Gun nomination during the week for his best on-ground performance against the Saints. He kicked 3 goals as well. However, they come up against a Boronia side that has a very, very solid defence. Ringwood, and I think the word is that Ringwood will be missing a few of their tall forwards as well. So with Jess Moore, the Allison boys down in that back line for Boronia, get the feeling, though, that the Hawks will probably be too strong. However, don't discount Ringwood on the weekend, but also for the rest of the season. They are an up-and-coming side.
Right, so next up is Mitcham versus Wantirna South.
Yeah, big game this one for both clubs. Mitcham especially, they've teased us a little bit so far. Mitcham, they had such a fantastic start to the year, won their first 2 games, but have had a bit of a form drop since. They now are 2 wins and 3 losses, sit in 8th position. They come up against the Wantirna South side that's slowly starting to build some momentum. Won their past 2 games before last weekend. Of course, took Heathmont to 4 points last weekend. A fantastic fourth quarter performance by the Devils. Just weren't able to quite get over the line in the end. Michael Jamieson in fantastic goal-kicking form for the Devils at the moment. Look, I think this is a game that Mitcham have set themselves to win. They know the potential that they have. They know the start of the season that they've had. And I think Wantirna South, they will know Mitcham, that they can beat a side like the Devils. So for mine, Mitcham in quite a close encounter out there at Walker Park.
Cool. And so North Ringwood versus Warrandyte.
North Ringwood, well, have a look at it, Annie. Have a look at the ladder at the moment. North Ringwood, 5 and zip sit atop of the ladder. Warrandyte, zip and 5 at the bottom of the ladder. Having said that, though, Warrandyte have been reasonably impressive in the past couple of weeks. Really took it up to Templestowe a fortnight ago, and of course took it up to the Glen Waverley Hawks last weekend, going down by 4 goals. There's no doubt, though, that North Ringwood will run away with this one big time. They're a class side. Had a bit of a scare against Ringwood this weekend. This could get ugly. North Ringwood by plenty.
So we've got the White Horse Pioneers versus Churnside Park.
Yeah, White Horse Pioneers, of course, had their first win a couple of weeks ago, but a bit of a reality check against Templestowe last weekend, going down by 75 points, but you can't ignore the goal-kicking form of Daniel Johnson, who's kicked 12 goals in the last 2 weeks. So certainly the Churnside Park defence will have their hands full, but Brett Davidson's men will be too strong for the White Horse Pioneers here. Fantastic victory by the Panthers last weekend. Scotty Hamill kicking 3, and the likes of Daniel London also having a good game as well. Ben Beattie also named in the best. So just get the feeling Churnside Park away from home will be too strong.
And last game for Divi 3 is Coldstream versus Templestowe.
Coldstream, they are very, very hard. They are a very hard team to read. You just never know what you're going to get with Coldstream. Of course, they dropped the game to the Wild Horse Pioneers a couple of weeks ago, but then they take it up to Boronia, a very class team. They take it up to 18 points last weekend. Pignatara kicked 4 goals, so good to see that man getting named in the best, or getting 4 goals next to his name. But Templestowe, from mine, are a class unit. They showed last weekend that they have some real firepower. Good to see Kay Magames kicking 4 goals, and possibly probably one of the most informed men in Division 3 at the moment is Troy Resentless. Had a fantastic game for the EFL Div 3-4 side when they played the Amos on the 1st of April. So they're in fantastic form. Ryan Bain, Alistair Quinn, Kane Magomez, all named in the best last weekend. Templestowe for mine, and Templestowe quite easily.
So for the games lining up in Division 2, we have Bayswater versus Donvale.
Yeah, interesting clash this one, particularly for the Bayswater Football Club. Probably been a little disappointing to say the least so far this season, but you can't sort of discount the form of Wayne McInerney. He's been in fantastic form for the Bayswater Football Club so far this season. Kicked 8 goals 2 weeks ago and was able to put through another 3 last weekend. However, they had a pretty disappointing loss to Roval. Donvale, on the other hand, we had a draw last week with Doncaster East. Of course, Donvale being one of the most impressive sides so far in Division 2. They currently sit 5th on the ladder, 2 wins, 2 losses and a draw. But they should have beaten Doncaster East last weekend. They're a much better side on paper than Doncaster East. Maybe it was just a bit of Doncaster East really lifting their game and Donvale maybe slightly off their game. This will be a good clash out at Bayswater Oval, a big ground. So is Donvale as well. Look, I think I'm going to go with Donvale. I really like their forward line at the moment with Jack Purcell up forward. He's back into some good goal-kicking form, and Jones and Hayden Cotsford are in very good form for Donvale as well. Don't discount Bayswater. This one will be very close, but Donvale for mine in a pretty tight encounter.
Right, so next up is Doncaster East versus Mulgrave.
8th versus 9th on the ladder. Doncaster East, 1 win from their 5 games so far. Good past fortnight for Doncaster East. Defeated the Waverley Blues and drew with Donvale, as we said just before. So Doncaster East certainly have the form. Having said that, though, Mulgrave haven't won a game, but gee, have they been close in a number of games. They took Doncaster to 13 points last weekend. They're so close. Luke Parker, their inspirational captain, is really trying to get their team over the line at the moment, but it's a case of close but no cigar. Look, I really want to tip the Mulgrave Football Club, but I can't. I just can't go past Doncaster East past 2 weeks. They look like they've really improved. They'll have a bit of confidence under their belt, and at Zerby's reserve, I think they'll be too strong.
So next up is Montrose versus Mooralbark.
Undoubtedly the game of the round in Division 2. These are serious big boys going at it. Mooralbark 5 and zip sit on top of the ladder. Montrose 4 and 1 sitting 3rd on the ladder. The key to this game for Montrose is, of course, Adam Cook. Now, Adam, when we went down to Montrose a couple of weeks ago, the guys on the gate said to me that Adam is the next best thing from sliced bread. Well, he's the best thing since the sliced bread, I should say. And he's been in good form so far, 17 goals from the first 4 games. But Mooralbark, there is no reason to tip against them. So much pre-season hype, and they're really living up to it at the moment. So Mooralbark for mine. It'll be a very close game out there at Montrose Recreation Reserve, but there's no reason to tip against Mooralbark. They should keep going on their winning ways, and it sets up a very good clash against Roval in a couple of rounds' time.
All right then, so we've got Upper Ferntree Gully versus Doncaster.
Yeah, Upper Ferntree Gully, disappointing loss to Mooralbark last weekend. It should have been a lot tighter. The Upper Gully side should have been a lot closer, I think, than what they actually got. Doncaster, a good win over Mulgrave, a scrappy win, but I think this one actually could get quite ugly. Upper Ferntree Gully sit 4th on the ladder, 3 wins and 2 losses. They've got a very elusive forward line, as we all know, as all Eastern Football League pundits would know, and I think this one will get quite ugly, actually. Upper Ferntree Gully by plenty.
And final game for Division 2, Waverley Blues versus Roval.
Well, Roval, 2nd on the ladder. Waverley Blues sitting 10th. Zip and 5. Waverley Blues have struggled, to say the least, to get their season up and going. A big loss to Montrose last weekend, and Roval, well, along with Mooralbark, they are the form side. This one could be quite a blowout, unfortunately. Roval with Nathan Hicks in pretty good goal-kicking form. Michael Bussey kicking 2 last weekend. Alex Frawley also getting named in the best players reasonably consistently so far this season. Roval by plenty, Annie.
Okay, so we're looking at the big boys from Division 1 now. We've got Croydon versus Vermont.
The big boys of Division 1. These are 2 reasonably large boys in terms of history. Plenty of history between these 2 clubs, of course, Croydon and Vermont. Croydon still yet to get their first win on the board in Division 1 so far this season, so they'll be looking to try and get that. However, they come up against the Vermont side that have teased the EFL so far, the EFL pundits out there. They were able to get back on the winners list last weekend with a 10-point victory over the South Croydon Football Club. Chris Barlow, interesting to note, put the shorts on last weekend, reasonably large shorts, and had a bit of a run around and even got himself a goal. So well done to Chris Barlow and the Vermont Football Club out there. And I think Vermont will probably be too strong. You just look at the likes of Jared Dalton, who looks like to be playing a little bit more up forward. He was, of course, as a fullback, but he's come to the Vermont Football Club and kicking a few more goals than probably what most expect. And Ryan Mullett just keeps getting in the best week after week. And Robbie Ross is still one of the best ruckmen in Division 1. Vermont by a fair margin for mine, Annie.
All right, then. So we've got next up South Croydon versus East Burwood.
East Burwood, they are surprising everyone at the moment. They continue their great run of form last weekend with a great victory over Croydon to the tune of 32 points. Steve Henshaw. Anthony Mariani's the guy who's really surprised most people across the Eastern Football League. Currently leads the goal kicking in Division 1. Added another 3 last weekend. But the best thing about East Burwood was that they were able to get a good spread of goal kickers last weekend. So a fantastic effort by them. Of course, they come up against South Croydon, who rely very heavily in terms of goal kicking on the Zippy King. Follow the man on Twitter as well. He just signed up one of the, of course, the EFL Media team's favourite Zippy King. So get around him. So they rely pretty heavily on Zippy up forward. East Burwood for mine, they're just in too good a form. They're in magnificent touch at the moment. They're blowing everyone away. They currently sit third on the ladder, 3 wins and 1 loss. Expect them to make that 4 wins and 1 loss after they play South Croydon on Saturday.
All right, thanks, Ben. We've got Scoresby versus Noble Park.
Division 1 rematch from the past 2 years, the Division 1 grand final rematch from the past 2 years, Annabelle, and it's been a fantastic rivalry between these two clubs. And Scoresby, well, they went under the radar at the start of the year, but now that they're the only team 4 and zip in Division 1, the only undefeated team in Division 1, you just can't ignore them. Noble Park able to get back on the winners list last weekend, but far from convincing, only defeated Blackburn by 12 points. Good to see Shane Allen kicking 4 goals, and the likes of Sam Monaghan, Craig Anderson, Robbie Kemperman, all named in the best. So good signs for Noble Park there. This is a bit of a toss of the coin game. I'm going to go with Noble Park. I just think that things are starting to settle down on the field there at the ball ring. This game is at Scoresby at Exeter Reserve, which kind of had me a little bit hesitant to tip Noble Park. But this is a real gut feeling that Noble Park are ready to really bounce back and make that charge towards the top 5 in Division 1. Noble Park for mine, but Scoresby will give it a really good shot. This will be a really good, high-quality game of Division 1 footy.
And next up, we've got Ballwin versus Blackburn.
Blackburn have bounced back in the past couple of weeks. As I said just before, really took it up to Noble Park. And, of course, got their first victory over Croydon a couple of weeks ago. A big, big victory as well. They sit 1 and 3 on the ladder, 9th position. Ballwin, on the other hand, currently sit in 2nd position, 3 wins and 1 loss. Very solid victory against Lilydale last weekend. Good to see Charlie Hendry again being kicked 2 goals and again named best man on the ground. He's in outstanding form at the moment. So Ballwin, Blackburn will really have to put a bit of a clamp on him on the weekend. Look, you just can't ignore Baldwin's form. They play that ground out there. They're starting to play that ground out there at SEN Park very, very well. They struggled over there in recent years, but they're starting to get a bit of a hang of things out there. It might be Daniel Donati's new game plan, which is working really well for them. Baldwin for mine, and I actually think they might do this quite easily.
All right, so we've got East Ringwood versus Knox.
I think East Ringwood and Knox, this game is probably the pick of all games in Division 1. I know that the Division 1 Grand Final rematch is a huge game between Scoresby and Noble Park, but the East Ringwood-Knox game, that's a beauty. I'm really looking forward to actually seeing this one. East Ringwood, they sit 11th on the ladder with 1 win and 3 losses, but that ladder position really doesn't do justice to how they've performed, particularly over the past fortnight. Of course, defeated Noble Park a couple of weeks ago, and they really did take it up to the Scoresby Football Club last weekend. Only 2 points was the difference in the end. They had a fantastic final quarter, restricted the Pies to 4 behinds in the final term. And East Ringwood really did take it up to them. Fell short by 2 points. Bernie Deneen has got this team up and about, doing magnificent work down there. Joel Perry, as I've said in the past couple of weeks, in fantastic form, being named in the best every single week. Knox, on the other hand, try and get a read on them. They sit 5th on the ladder, 2 wins and 2 losses. They're the best defensive team in the competition, so they've conceded the least amount of points, but they're the worst attacking team. They've scored the least amount of points out of any team in Division 1. So hard to get a read on Knox. And I just get the feeling that East Ringwood will probably be able to get the jump on them, especially out there on Mandandenong Road, out there at East Ringwood Reserve. Think Bernie Deneen and the Cavalry will be set for this game. They'll be able to get a victory over Knox and finally get their campaign going and make that record 2 wins and 3 losses.
All right, so final game for the big boys in Divi 1. We've got Norwood versus Lilydale.
Norwood and Lilydale. Norwood have been in fantastic form so far this season. Bit of a surprise packet. Sit in 4th position with 3 wins and 1 loss. Had to really scrap against Knox last weekend. Johnson was the only multiple goal scorer for the entire game with 2 goals. Good to see Jakey Ford also getting named in with a goal there. And Jonathan Wing continues to do good stuff in the ruck for the Norsemen. Lilydale, they'll be very disappointed with their performance against Ballwin last Saturday, only kicking 3 goals for the game. Nathan O'Keefe kicking 2 of those goals as well. Very disappointing. I think they'll bounce back in terms of a contest against Norwood, but you can't avoid the bandwagon that's going down at Mullen Reserve at the moment. Kevin Taboli has got this group working very, very nicely at the moment. So get the feeling that Norwood will probably be able to get a victory over Lilydale this weekend. However, expect the Falcons to be a much improved side this weekend. Thanks for running through the games with me, Annie. Look forward to hearing your dulcet tones on the 98.1 Radio Eastern airways very, very soon.
Can't wait. Thanks again.
Of course, make sure you tune in to the 98.1 Radio Eastern Game of the Round this Saturday. It is, of course, the Division 4 Grand Final replay in Division 3. Heathmont taking on the Glen Waverley Hawks. Tune in from 1 p.m. this Saturday afternoon all the way until 6 p.m. on 98.1 Radio Eastern FM, and of course streaming right here on the EFL's YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us on the EFL Friday preview once again, and as a once wise man recently said, stick your fork in us because we are very much done.